Charles Donovan froze at the glass door and forgot to breathe. His hand rested on the handle, cold and heavy as if the whole house were holding it there. On the lawn, his 8-year-old blind son, Caleb, stood with his small fists raised. Facing him was the housekeeper, a tall black man named Daniel Carter, moving slow and calm, guiding the boy's hands in circles. "Find your center," Daniel said, voice gentle. "Feet wide, knees soft, breathe." Caleb listened. He tilted his head the way he did when he focused hard. Bare feet pressed the grass. His shoulders relaxed. He tried a small punch, then another. His form wasn't perfect, but it was brave. Charles heard it before he let himself see it. Laughter. Soft at first, then bright. Caleb's laughter. The sound startled him more than the sight. His boy almost never laughed. Not like this. Not since the surgeries that failed. Not since the day the light faded and never came back. After that, Caleb's world grew quiet. He spoke less. He moved less. He clung to safe spaces and soft corners. But out there in the open sun, his son was laughing. Charles's jaw tightened. Daniel was hired to keep the house in order. Polish the banister, carry laundry, prep breakfast trays, keep the schedule neat. Not teach combat. Not touch his child. Not try to shape him. This was not in the contract. This was not in any plan Charles had made. He nearly pushed the door open. Nearly called Daniel inside and ended this. Then Caleb slipped on the grass and fell back with a soft thud. For a heartbeat, Charles braced for tears. Instead, Caleb burst into a full, rich laugh that rolled across the yard like warm wind. Daniel laughed too, not with pity, not with that careful voice people use when they are sorry for a child like Caleb. He laughed like a coach who saw a good try and wanted another one. He offered his hands and pulled the boy up. "You'll fall 1,000 times," Daniel said. "That's how you learn where the ground is. That's how you learn where you are." "Like a blind ninja?" Caleb asked, grinning so wide Charles could feel it from the doorway. "Like a kid who doesn't quit," Daniel answered. Something broke open in Charles's chest. Pride, fear, anger, all mixed together in a rush that made his fingers shake. Since when did Caleb talk like this? Since when did his voice carry light? Since when did his shoulders look steady? Charles stepped back from the curtain before either of them could notice him. He moved down the silent hallway, past the white walls and the gold frames and the long shadow of his perfect life. The mansion sat on a green hill in Connecticut, cold and bright as stone. People called it beautiful. To Charles, it was a machine, a clean engine of order. No mess, no surprises, no risks. He climbed the stairs, shut himself in his study, and locked the door. He set his phone on the desk and stared at it like it might explain what he had just seen. His reflection in the black screen looked older than he felt. Or maybe he felt older than he looked. He couldn't tell. He tried to name the feeling burning behind his ribs. Was it anger? Because a boundary had been crossed. Was it fear? Because his son could get hurt? Or was it something worse? The thought that another man had reached his boy in a way he hadn't. On the desk lay a list of therapists, tutors, mobility trainers, all approved and scheduled, all neat. Charles had done everything the book said. He had hired the best. He had built a fortress around his son. He had promised himself that nothing would touch the boy again. Not loss, not danger, not chaos, and yet in a quiet backyard, a man he barely knew was showing Caleb how to feel the ground and trust his body, and Caleb was smiling. Charles ran a hand over his face and stood. He looked out the window at the garden lines, so straight, so exact. He thought of every rule he had written into this house, the meals, the lessons, the checklists. Control felt safe. Control felt right. But control had never made Caleb laugh. He heard footsteps in the hall and opened his door a crack. Caleb walked past, tapping his cane lightly, Daniel beside him describing the hallway like a map. 3 steps to the rug. Hear the echo change? That's the ceiling opening up. Good. Left hand to the wall. Fingers soft. Count your steps. Caleb smiled as he counted. 7, 8, 9. You hear the air get cooler? Daniel asked. That's the tile near the kitchen. It smells like cinnamon, Caleb said, happy. Then we're close. Charles closed the door and leaned against it. He felt the old reflex rise and call the agency, change staff, tighten the rules. But the reflex paused. It met the image of his boy standing tall in the sun, and it paused. Maybe this was a trick. Maybe Daniel wanted to impress him. Maybe this would go wrong. Maybe. But the sound of Caleb's laugh cut through every maybe like a bell. Something was out of place. Something was moving without his permission. And maybe that was the point, or maybe it was the danger. Charles couldn't tell yet. He only knew one thing with a hard, clean certainty. He would find out who Daniel Carter really was. He would learn why a man hired to be invisible had stepped into the center of his son's world. And he would decide, not tomorrow, not later, but soon, whether to shut the door on this new path or walk through it. For now, he did what he always did when he felt the ground shift. He reached for control. He opened his laptop, typed Daniel Carter, Brooklyn, and watched the empty search page wait for his command. Downstairs, a timer chimed. Caleb laughed again, softer this time. Daniel said, "Perfect stance." "You're stronger than you think." Charles stared at the screen. The next morning, the big house felt different. It was still clean, still bright, still quiet. But the quiet had weight now, like a held breath. Charles moved through the halls with his coffee untouched. He watched without speaking. He watched Daniel carry a laundry basket with one hand and clap once so Caleb could turn toward the sound. "Left," Daniel said softly. "Now count 10 steps. Listen to the echo." Caleb nodded, counting. 1, 2, 3. Charles kept his face flat, but inside he was a storm. He told himself he was only observing. He told himself he was being careful. But he had already made a call, and a man he trusted to handle hard things had already picked up. By noon, a private investigator sat in a car down the hill, camera on the passenger seat, laptop open. Charles had used him before, for business messes, for hidden threats. "I want the full background," Charles had said. "Work history, family, lawsuits, anything that matters. Do it quietly." "You looking for dirt?" the man asked. "I'm looking for truth," Charles replied, and hung up. Downstairs in the kitchen, Daniel cooked simple food the way Caleb liked it. Warm eggs, toast cut in triangles, cinnamon on top. He hummed while he worked. It wasn't a happy song or a sad one, just steady, like someone walking the same road every day. Caleb sat at the table, his cane on the chair beside him. "Can we do the circles again?" he asked. "After breakfast," Daniel said. "Strength starts with fuel." "Fuel," Caleb repeated, smiling. He liked the word. It made his chest feel bigger. Charles stood in the doorway long enough for Daniel to notice him. Daniel nodded once. "Good morning, Mr. Donovan." Charles didn't smile. "Where did you learn to teach like that?" Daniel kept his voice level. "Work I used to do." "At a school? What kind of work?" "Physical education," Daniel said. "And some volunteer training." He slid the plate in front of Caleb. "Careful, hot." Charles wanted to ask more, to push, to pull answers out of the air. Instead, he walked away. Not because he trusted Daniel, but because he trusted proof more than words. Proof was on the way. Proof would make the decision for him. Later, when the house was quiet again, Daniel sat on the edge of his small room behind the garage. He looked at the photos on his wall. A boy with a wide smile and a red belt tied wrong on purpose, a flyer from a community center, a certificate creased from moving too many times. A shoebox sat under the bed, heavy with letters he could recite from memory. He opened it anyway and touched the top envelope like a prayer. Before this mansion, before polished floors and careful glances, Daniel had taught gym in a Brooklyn public school. Loud kids, dusty courts, broken clocks. He loved it. He loved the way children moved when they forgot they were being watched. He loved the way fear could turn into skill when someone believed in them. Then he started a volunteer class for blind kids. It began with 3 students. It grew to 12. He taught balance, breath, simple steps, how to hear space, how to feel danger early and make a smart choice. He was strict and kind. He never said be brave like a slogan. He said be ready like a promise. His son Marcus came to every class. Marcus was blind by 5. He was small and fast, and his laugh filled rooms. Daniel taught him the same things he taught all the kids: how to stand tall, how to fall safe, how to listen for the edge of the curb and the change in the wind. When Marcus was 12, 2 men with a knife cornered him near their building. He tried to do all the things he knew. He used his voice. He moved his feet. He went for the throat and ran. It wasn't enough. The police wrote a line that said, "Resisted." The news didn't write his name at all. For a year, Daniel did not teach. He did not sing. He walked to work and back like a ghost. The class ended. The flyers came down. The world kept moving, loud and normal and cruel. Bills grew teeth. Rent needed paying. He took whatever jobs would hold still. When the agency sent him here to a house that looked like ice in the sun, he told himself he would stay quiet. He would do the work. He would be invisible. Then he met Caleb. He heard the careful steps, the tight breaths. He heard how the boy waited for permission to exist. He saw himself. He saw his son, and the promise he had tried to bury rose up like a hand on his back. He didn't ask for permission. He began with soft games, hand claps, echo hunts, steps on grass. It wasn't violence. It was life. Upstairs, Charles opened a plain manila envelope. The investigator's voice came through his phone. No criminal record. Former PE teacher. Community work with blind kids. His son, the man paused. His son, Marcus Carter. Blind, killed at 12. There are clippings. I'll send them. I'll drop the file if you want hard copies. Charles didn't speak for a long moment. He looked at the photo on his desk. Caleb at 2 years old before the light left. Mouth open in a big laugh he barely remembered. He pressed his thumb to the image like he could warm it back to life. Drop the file, he said. After the call, Charles walked to the upstairs landing. Below him he could see the kitchen. Danielle was chopping strawberries. Caleb was tapping the table, counting beats like a song. The smell of cinnamon filled the air. Is it okay to be strong and scared at the same time? Caleb asked. Danielle didn't look up. That's the only way most people are strong. Charles felt something twist inside. He thought of all the times he had tried to crush fear by making the world small. He thought of all the closed doors. He thought of the simple sound of Caleb's laugh, new and old at once. At dinner, Caleb talked more than usual. He told a story about the sound the fountain made when the wind hit it just right. He said the water sparkled in his ears. Charles listened, words catching on the edge of pride and pain. Danielle kept quiet, eating slowly, checking nothing, asking for nothing. When the plates were cleared, Charles called Danielle into the office. He kept the file face down on the desk. I hired you to keep things orderly, Charles said. I know, Danielle answered. You started training my son without asking. Yes. Why? Danielle took a breath. Because I could hear he was fading. Because I know what the world does to kids who seem easy to push. Because I have seen what happens when we wait too long to teach them how to stand. He's 8, Charles said. He's blind. He's also alive, Danielle said, calm, not rude, just true. He can learn to trust his body. He can learn to hear danger before it touches him. He can learn to carry himself like he belongs. None of that is a fight. It's a way of walking. Charles stared at the man and saw nothing soft there, only steadiness and grief held with both hands. He flipped the file over but didn't open it. You should have told me about your past. Danielle's jaw moved once. Some rooms take the truth and turn it into a weapon. I didn't want to hand you a reason to say no before you saw him laugh. The words were simple. They cut anyway. For the next 2 days, the house became tight again. Danielle stayed polite. He cooked, he cleaned, he showed up on time, he stuck to the list. Caleb felt the cold shift and didn't have a name for it. He held his stuffed dog more and asked fewer questions. On the third afternoon, rain pressed against the tall windows. Charles stood where he had first frozen and watched the yard blur. He could not stop hearing the investigator's voice. He could not stop seeing Marcus's age written in small print. He could not stop remembering the joy that had returned, sudden and loud, to his own child. He went to the kitchen. Danielle was washing a pan. I don't know if I'm angry at you, Charles said, voice flat from too much holding in, or at myself. Danielle turned off the water. You don't have to choose. Caleb walked in at that moment, head turned toward the sound. Can we do the circles? He asked. Danielle looked at Charles. Charles looked at his son. The old answer rose like a wall. The new answer rose like a door. After dinner, Charles said. Together. Danielle nodded once, surprised, then hid it by reaching for a towel. Caleb smiled like he could see every face in the room. Outside, the rain eased. Inside, the quiet changed shape. It wasn't a held breath anymore. It was a breath let out, slow and shaky, but real. And somewhere down the hill, a stranger's car idled, engine off, camera away. The file had been delivered. The truth was in the house now. What would come next would not be quiet. Thursday felt too quiet, like the walls were waiting. Charles left early in a dark suit, mind stuck between anger and doubt. He told himself it was just business in the city, but he carried the manila file in his briefcase like a stone. On the drive, he kept seeing two pictures at once. A smiling boy in a red belt he'd never met and his own son laughing on green grass. The two images would not separate. Back at the mansion, the air held a soft hush. Daniel folded Caleb's laundry on the couch. Shirts, small socks. The t-shirt with raised letters that said, "Strong inside." Caleb sat cross-legged on the rug, headphones around his neck, listening to a story about a hero who could hear danger before it came. "Ready for circles?" Caleb asked. "In a bit," Daniel said. "First, feel the room. Tell me what you notice." Caleb tilted his head. "The dryer is done. The house is warm. I smell soap and orange." "Good," Daniel said. "Orange oil on the wood. Now listen for the air change by the hallway." "That's your path," Caleb smiled. He liked maps made from sound. The doorbell rang, once, then again, longer. Daniel wiped his hands and went to the back door. He kept the latch on and opened the door a finger's width. A man stood on the step. Hoodie, baseball cap, fake beard that didn't sit right. His eyes moved too fast. "Delivery for Donovan," he said. "Needs a signature." "She's not home," Daniel answered. He almost closed the door, but the man wedged a boot in the gap. "Then you'll do," the man said, and hit the door hard. The latch snapped. He stepped inside. Daniel stayed between the man and the hallway. Calm voice. Hands relaxed. Feet ready. "You're making a mistake," Daniel said. "Where's the safe?" The man hissed. "I know this kind of house, money, jewelry. You got 10 seconds. "There isn't one," Daniel replied. "Leave now." The man's gaze slid past him. "Heard there's a blind kid here. People pay fast when kids cry." Everything in Daniel went still. The world narrowed to a line. "You don't touch him," he said. The intruder shoved him. Daniel hit the wall and pain shot through his shoulder, hot and bright. He stood again at once. "Caleb," Daniel called, voice firm, not loud. "Do what we practiced." In the living room, Caleb's body locked, then straightened. He took a breath the way Daniel taught him. He turned his face toward the sound, just enough. He reached out with his hearing and found the room. The rug edge, the coffee table leg, the place where the air felt cool near the hallway corner. The intruder lunged. Daniel sidestepped, guided by breath and floor. The man's foot caught the rug Caleb had nudged earlier when he was counting fringes. The attacker stumbled forward with a curse. Daniel didn't waste it. Short elbow to the throat. Not a movie punch. A clean, small strike that ends a choice before it becomes a disaster. The man gagged and dropped to one knee, both hands at his neck. Daniel stepped back, keeping space. "Out," Daniel said. The man wheezed, tried to stand, swung wild. Daniel slipped to the side, felt the wall at his back, and grabbed a heavy lamp. He didn't lift it to kill. He lifted it to warn. The man saw the weight of it and froze. "Okay," the intruder gasped. "Okay, I'm done." He staggered to the door, clawed it open, and ran. The sound of his steps broke into small, scared echoes down the stone path. Silence fell, sharp and ringing. Daniel put the lamp down gently. He locked the door. His hands shook now that it was over. He pulled in air, deep and steady. Then he turned, already moving. "Caleb, I'm here," the boy said, voice small. Daniel knelt and pulled him into his arms. He felt Caleb's shake pass into his own bones. "You did it," Daniel whispered. "You listened. You found the space. You stayed where you were strong." "I was scared," Caleb said. "So was I," Daniel answered. Strong and scared at the same time. "That's real." He called the police. Words came out clean because training makes room for them. While he waited, he checked the broken latch, then checked Caleb again. Hands, face, breathing. He put ice on his shoulder. He kept his voice steady so the boy could borrow it. Sirens arrived with blue flashes. Officers came in pairs, careful boots, clipped tones. They asked questions. They looked at the door. One officer paused when he saw Caleb's cane, then looked at Daniel's shoulder and the lamp on the floor and understood enough to write it right. "Brave," one of them said to Caleb. "Both of you." When the cars left, quiet rolled back in, softer now. Caleb leaned against Daniel on the couch. The boy's fingers were wrapped in Daniel's scarf like it was a rope on a boat. Hours later, Charles stepped from his car to see lights fade down the hill. His stomach dropped. He ran inside, tie pulled loose, briefcase forgotten. He found them in the living room. Glass bits under the lamp, latch broken, Daniel holding ice to his shoulder, Caleb safe under Daniel's arm. "What happened?" Charles asked, breath thin. Daniel told it plain. No hero story, no extra shine, just what was true. While he spoke, Charles looked at his son. Caleb's face was tired and calm. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't small. He was holding on. To Daniel's scarf. To Daniel's steady breath, to a new part of himself. Something inside Charles cracked open. Not like a drop, more like a long, slow tear in a heavy curtain. Fear poured through. And behind it, recognition. This man he had doubted had stood between danger and his son and had not moved. The old voice rose. Fire him. Tighten rules. Make the house safe again. A newer voice spoke under it. The house did not keep him safe. A person did. A person you didn't choose to trust, but your son did. Charles sank into the chair across from them. He looked smaller in that moment, not because he was weak, but because he finally let the truth stand up in the room. Thank you, he said to Daniel. The words were rough and real. Daniel nodded once. He did the work. I just stood wherever the danger might step first. Caleb turned his face toward his father. Dad, I'm here, Charles said, moving closer. He touched his son's hair. I'm sorry I wasn't home. You are now, Caleb whispered and leaned into him. Night pressed soft against the windows. The mansion, built to be hard and perfect, felt different, like it had taken one deep breath and decided not to hold it anymore. In the kitchen, the clock ticked. In the living room, 3 heartbeats found the same slow rhythm. Later, after Caleb slept, Charles and Daniel stood by the broken door. The metal of the latch looked small in Daniel's hand. I wanted control to be the answer, Charles said. I'm starting to think courage is... Control is a wall, Daniel said. Courage is a door you can close or open when you choose. Charles looked at him. Can you keep teaching him? Daniel met his eyes. If you want me to. If he wants it. He does, Charles said, voice low. And I do. They didn't shake hands. They didn't need to. The decision sat between them like a light left on. Upstairs, Charles checked on Caleb one more time. The boy slept with Daniel's scarf in his fingers. Charles bent and kissed his forehead. You were brave, he whispered. I'll learn to be too. Down the hall, the manila file lay on the desk, still open. Charles turned it over and put it away in a drawer. Not to forget, to honor, to make space for what came next. The house, at last, was learning how to be a home. Morning came soft, like the house had slept for the first time in years. Charles stood at the kitchen doorway watching Daniel slice strawberries with his sore shoulder held close. Coffee steamed. Toast popped. Caleb's cane clicked down the hall like a tiny drumbeat, and then he appeared. Hair messy, smile quiet but real. You don't have to work today, Charles said to Daniel. Daniel kept cutting. Work helps. Routine is a friend. It's more than work now, Charles said. His voice didn't have its old hard edge. It had a weight that felt like truth. What you did yesterday wasn't in any contract, it was care. Daniel nodded once, not for praise but for clarity. He did the brave part. Caleb touched the counter, following the warmth and smell. Are we practicing after breakfast? If your dad says yes, Daniel said, looking to Charles instead of past him. Charles hesitated for one breath, then another. The old rules were there, neat and stacked in his head. Behind them, something new stood up and asked to be chosen. Yes, he said. But first, all 3 of us go outside. No schedule. No plan, just outside. They took the back steps to the cool morning lawn. No guards, no checklist. Grass under bare feet. The fountain whispered. A breeze brushed the hedges and made a soft hush that felt like kindness. Daniel stood near, quiet as a lighthouse. Caleb tilted his face to the air. What do you hear? Daniel asked. Caleb smiled. The water, the bees. My dad breathing slower than usual. Charles laughed, a little shocked at the sound of it. Caught. Good, Daniel said. Breath is a map too. They walked the yard like it was new land. Caleb traced the stones with his toes and found edges with his cane. Charles learned to follow, not lead. When Caleb paused, Charles paused. When Caleb turned his head to listen, Charles turned too, copying the motion like a student. Daniel didn't announce anything. He just held the space and let skill rise the way it does when fear steps aside. By afternoon, the house had a different rhythm. Charles wasn't hovering. He was present. He watched without shrinking the world. He let Caleb go 3 steps ahead and come back on his own. He let silence be a teacher. In his study, a file sat on the desk, but now another folder lay beside it. A clean binder with blank pages. tabbed with words that made Charles nervous and excited at the same time. Foundation, mission, programs, families. He carried it downstairs. Danielle was in the pantry setting jars in a straight line. Charles set the binder on the counter and opened it. "I don't know the whole path," he said, "but I know the first step. I want to fund a program for blind kids and single parents. Practical skill, confidence, safety that isn't just locks and cameras. I want you to help build it." Daniel stood very still. His eyes lowered to the binder like it was a name he hadn't heard spoken gently in a long time. "Are you sure?" "No," Charles said, and he let the honesty sit between them. "But I am willing, and I think willingness is where courage begins." "Titles don't matter to me," Daniel said. "They matter to other people," Charles answered. "They open doors. Sensory coach and program lead. Salary. Benefits. Time to design something that outlives this house." Daniel's throat worked once. He didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was low. "I never wanted to replace my son. I wanted to keep another boy from being left alone with fear." Charles met his eyes. "You didn't replace anyone. You returned someone. You gave me my child back." They shook hands then, not like a deal, but like a promise. Weeks turned into a steady line of days. Caleb changed in small ways that added up to a brave shape. He walked taller. He asked to count the steps to the mailbox and then to the end of the drive. He told jokes at breakfast and tapped rhythms on the table. At school, he answered before the teacher finished the question. He made a friend by sharing the way he heard the wind draw pictures. Charles changed too. He learned to name his fear without letting it drive. He learned that help is not a weakness if it makes a child stronger. He learned that control can keep a boy safe and small, but courage lets him be safe and whole. One Saturday, they went to the park with no plan except to be there. Caleb walked the path with his cane, counting benches and listening for bicycles. A little girl asked, "How do you know where to go if you don't see?" Caleb said, "I feel the ground, and I hear the space. It's enough." Charles blinked hard and looked away to breathe. The first public event came faster than anyone expected. The school held an assembly for Voices of Courage. The auditorium was full. Teachers, families. A local reporter with a small camera. Charles sat in the front row, hands locked, heart loud. Daniel stayed in the back against the wall where he could see everything and be seen by no one. The lights dimmed. Caleb walked onto the stage alone. No music, no script. His cane tapped twice, then rested beside him like a quiet friend. He stood still and breathed the way Daniel taught him. Then he spoke. "I don't see with my eyes," he said, clear and calm, "but I see with my body and I hear with my heart. I fall, I get up. I exist, and I am not small." Silence held for a beat like the world was making room, and then the room broke into a roar. Charles stood without meaning to. He clapped until his palms stung. Daniel closed his eyes and let one tear do the job of many. On the ride home, Caleb slept, cheek on the seatbelt. His hand held the corner of Daniel's scarf like a flag from a country he finally belonged to. Charles watched in the mirror and felt a new kind of quiet inside, a quiet made from relief, not fear. That evening, they sat in the garden where the first lesson had startled a father into anger and a boy into joy. The fountain whispered again. The air smelled like rain and cut grass. Charles placed an envelope on the table. Inside were papers signed and sealed. The foundation's name, the first grant, the program outline Daniel had drafted in tidy lines. "I don't know how to honor Marcus properly," Charles said, "but the first scholarship will carry his name." Daniel looked down. He touched the paper like it was skin. "Thank you," he said. 2 words that felt bigger than the yard. Caleb woke from a short nap and shuffled out to them, hair smashed on one side. "Are we like a real family now?" he asked, the question he had been circling for weeks. Charles looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at Charles. Neither man spoke first. Then Charles said, "Yes, in our own way, real as the ground." Caleb grinned. "Then can we eat outside?" They ate on the grass with plates on their knees. No centerpieces, no rolls, just forks, voices, and the sound of healing doing its quiet work. Later, the house lights glowed warm through the windows instead of bright and cold. The broken latch on the back door had been replaced, but the door itself, this idea that courage could walk in and sit at the table, stayed open. Night came, and no one feared it. Charles tucked Caleb in and left the door open a little, the way Daniel suggested so the house could breathe. He paused at the hall and looked back. You were strong today, he said. Caleb smiled. Strong and scared at the same time. That's real, Charles answered, and turned off the light. Downstairs, Daniel closed the binder and set tomorrow's page on top. He didn't know every step. He didn't need to. The path would appear under their feet, one honest choice at a time. 3 people. 1 house. A new rhythm. They had not erased the past. They had done something harder. They had made room for it and kept walking.